Hi, I'm Nicole Masters, agroecologist, originally from New Zealand, now based in Paradise Valley, Montana. Why I'm for the soil is because soil is everything. We're talking climate change, water quality, nutritious food, profitability, drought mitigation. It all comes back down to soil. So if you live on planet Earth and you eat food, you want to get interested in soil.
Good morning, everyone. We're pleased to have you join us for the Soil a Conversation. Our host, Jeff Ishii, isn't able to join us today because of some technical difficulties, but we're very pleased to have my co-host, Mary Sketch Bryant, with us from the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. And then we have a special guest with us, Dr. Christine Mahoney from the University of Virginia. Christine is the Chief Innovation Officer at the Batten School of Leadership and Policy, and then she's also a professor of politics and public policy. And one reason we've also want to have this conversation with Christine is she's also a regenerative organic flower farmer in the Charlottesville area. So welcome, Christine. And if you could just tell us a little bit more about your background and your journey into farming.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Good to be with you all. I love For the Soil, and it's been a great resource for us as we do, agritourism events for the Charlottesville area. People often want to know more about the principles, and so For the Soil is a nice way for us to boil it down in a really accessible way. So I am a professor of politics and public policy. And I launched and I've run the social entrepreneurship and impact investing program at UVA for the past 15 years. And through that work, we've had the opportunity to work with social entrepreneurs that are trying to, solve environmental challenges through a private sector solution. And so I've had the opportunity to meet companies like Appalachian Botanical Company that are converting abandoned mine land into lavender fields. We've worked with companies that are converting, traditional tobacco farming into organic indigo farming and supplying other social enterprises like Patagonia. And so I had seen a lot of really interesting models. During COVID, my academic research is on social entrepreneurship to support the forcibly displaced, so refugees worldwide. And I started an organization called the Refugee Investment Network doing that. And many refugees worldwide are in the agricultural space. And so there's a lot of really creative social enterprises worldwide, hiring the displaced, being started by the displaced. And so I had in my mind all of these kind of innovative social enterprise models in the environment, kind of pro-environmental, pro-regenerative ag space. And so during COVID, I live on a small farm with my husband, and we weren't able to do the global international work that we had been doing with the Refugee Investment Network. And so I was like, what can I do right here on my farm to create jobs for people displaced and also sequester carbon, support pollinators, support biodiversity? And so I was thinking about some of these models I had seen over the past decade. And I decided flower farming was for me. So I went to Penn State, so another big ag school, and I worked in woody root plant pathology. And woody root plant pathology isn't that beautiful, but our greenhouses were right next to the horticulture greenhouses. So I got to see the PhD students that were working on beautiful things rather than rotten fruit tree roots, which is what I was working on. And so I thought, while we're in lockdown and while we can't travel the world and advocate for these social enterprise models, maybe I can start one right here at home. And so I started 4 seasons ago a regenerative organic flower farm. At the same time, we started a regenerative apiary. So we have 70 beehives now. And my husband started a mead company, which is honey wine. So it's one of the oldest alcohols humans have made in partnership with our livestock, which is our millions of bees. And so we talk about a bloom to bottle approach, right, where we're supporting the soil, which supports beautiful flowers, which supports huge numbers of pollinators in addition to our honeybees. Then we make delicious honey, and then we make beautiful honey wine. So that was the kind of pathway I went from I have a lot of hats, and one hat is a professor of social entrepreneurship. Another hat is chief innovation officer, where I'm bringing in social entrepreneurs and people investing in social entrepreneurs and getting to see so many of these incredible models. And then I decided, like, let me try my hand at actually doing that right here in Charlottesville. And so it's been a really great learning experience. I feel like I've become a better professor because I'm actually, running a social enterprise now. And then I get to do this hands-on work of sequestering carbon, mitigating carbon, which I'm really passionate about, and then supporting all of this biodiversity and all of this pollinator health.
And Christine, I loved your explanation of all of the hats you wear. And it has me, one of the threads that I'm seeing through all of them is this systems thinking approach that I'm sure you have to apply to on your farm, in your work at UVA. Where do you see systems in agriculture and public policy intersecting?
Oh yeah, I think that's such a great question. Yeah, and I do think of it that way. I think sometimes the challenges facing us, like as a species, can get really overwhelming. And so that's why I've been drawn to being a farmer myself, because like if nothing else, at least I can sequester 66 metric tons of carbon, right? And then through the Central Virginia Flower Collective, us we're just 9 farms, but us working together, right, we can mitigate, we're mitigating over 400,000 tons of carbon every season. So we can do that together. But then to your point, like when we think a little bit more systems wide and we collaborate, we can have an even larger impact, right? And so that's what has been really interesting. I also have a very large research project looking at climate resilience in Appalachia and renewable energy. And on that project, we're collaborating, with JMU, with William and Mary, with professors across UVA, community members in Appalachian Virginia, and we're supporting communities as they develop climate resilience strategic plans. And through that process, it's such a larger impact than any one person can have alone. And us working in concert together, we're able to have a bigger impact than even just the sum of our parts. And so that's what has also been exciting about this role as Chief Innovation Officer, in that it's very much about thinking as a system, both at my school level, which is the School of Leadership and Public Policy, but we're leading the university's work in social enterprise across the whole university. So we're working to scale up access to education resources to thousands of students so that when students feel like they can't have an impact through one channel, that they can think about how do they build systems and how do they collaborate to have some agency in a really complex world. So that's been exciting. And, now through that role too, I had the opportunity to collaborate with Rodale, which is a global leader in regenerative organic agriculture. And we've partnered with a number of social enterprises, farmers, UVA Sustainability, other universities, to put on this 2-day summit, bringing tons of different stakeholders together that care about the connection between farms and anchor institutions. So that's our universities and our hospitals, right? These big anchor institutions have big procurement budgets. And if we can kind of help steer those huge ships, and they can just put some percentage of their procurement budgets into local farms and specifically regenerative farms, like that has a major positive ripple effect in the whole system. So yeah, I think it's that system thinking and working collaboratively to have outsized impact, and within it, working at the very soil level, and so that you really understand what we're trying to do, and you feel like you have that agency as well.
We're talking today with Dr. Christine Mahoney from the University of Virginia. Dr. Mahoney is the Chief Innovation Officer at the Batten School of Leadership and Policy, as well as the Chief Innovation Officer. At the same time, Christine and her husband have a business wayflowering flower farm in the Charlottesville area. So we're very pleased to have this discussion. And Christine, I've also, we're in a very interesting time with, people thinking that, well, the government shouldn't be involved, it should be very small, and others thinking that the market is going to solve all of the societal issues that we're facing. When you talk about social enterprise, it to me, it seems like you're trying to find some common ground between the need for trying to address social issues as well as trying to leverage what the market can do. Could you elaborate on that, please?
I think you have it exactly right. Yes. I mean, social enterprises, they're trying to use business models, but to achieve social and environmental goals. They can be organized as a for-profit business. They can also be organized as like an enterprising nonprofit. But the goal like is mission, right? It's in positive environmental and social impact. And then exactly as correct, it is a really bipartisan space at a time where it feels like nothing is bipartisan. I think regenerative agriculture can be that as well, right? I mean, I think we can all get behind supporting farmers, getting farmer input costs down, getting farmer yields up, and having healthier food and plants for all of us. So I think almost anything can be polarized these days, but I like these two spaces because they're a place that bring people together. But to your point, I personally do think that there is a role for government to be catalyzing some of this work. In some places, like some of the places that I work in down in Appalachian, Virginia, the markets just aren't functioning there, right? There's been a lot of challenges and there's been a lot of economic decline. And there is opportunity around social enterprise and there is opportunity around regenerative agriculture, but you just don't have the resources in the community. Like in entrepreneurship, we often talk about the friends and family round, right? When you're talking about a really low resource community, that base kind of startup capital just isn't there. And that's where I really think that there is a role for the government to be catalyzing, even regardless of which party you're with. Just hoping that this stuff happens on its own, especially in under-resourced areas, is, I think, just false thinking. So I hope that we can get back to a realization that some seed capital from the government can help catalyze the right kind of businesses that are really good for communities and good for the soil and good for the earth. And I hope we can all advocate for more of that.
And Christine, thinking back to I say your local and global hats. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I'd be interested if you have a similar experience that I often find I have, where I'll go to a farm or, someone who's doing something really neat on the ground and I'm incredibly inspired. And then you go read an article about soil degradation globally. How do you not feel overwhelmed in those dichotomies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does come back to that idea of systems thinking, right? It's like we need to be working at the individual farmer level, but we need to be making sure that we're creating systems so that kind of many farmers can succeed worldwide, right? And so what is interesting, what we've seen globally, is sometimes there's models, social enterprise models and the financing, what we call impact investing in those models, that have been invented overseas because the situation is so resource scarce. So something like microfinance, for example, right, which was invented in Bangladesh, and then brought back to the United States because sometimes there's parts of our country that are so well resourced, we don't think of these creative ways to get financing done and support done. So I think that there are models globally that we can bring back locally. For example, there's been movement around green bonds and blue bonds as ways to get capital into conservation for the environment. Those are now being brought back to the United States, right? They were really developed overseas. Things like blended finance, which were really invented by international aid organizations working in Africa, those are now being brought back. We work with a blended finance fund called Invest Appalachia that's investing through Appalachia. And so in a blended finance fund, you're taking some philanthropic capital, you're taking some concessionary debt, and then you're de-risking a new area for private capital that needs more returns because of fiduciary responsibility. So, we're seeing examples of that you likely know. Foodshed Capital. Foodshed is actually one of our partners on the Farm to Institution Symposium we're hosting, and they're doing that kind of work, right? Like, how do we get, if you just look at the finances of starting a farm today and the cost of land, right? As the finance people say, it doesn't pencil out, right? Like by the time you take a mortgage on land and try to get all of your infrastructure in place, like you're going to be paying off that debt forever, and the margins on farming just don't make it, right? So if we use new social enterprise models, like we work with a angel investing network in Appalachia called Country Rose Angel Network, and they invested in mountain steer Mountain Steer was a very traditional meat production facility that was working in traditional ways, and their margins were terrible. And then during COVID, the next generation of farmers really innovated. They did direct to consumer. They were doing grass fed. They were capturing more of their margins. They were processing their own meat. And now they're really like a thriving farm, right? And so we need to figure out ways to help farmers get the capital they need to develop better business models so that they're more financially resilient, so that they can be more environmentally resilient. And so, yeah, I think, with social entrepreneurship, our students are facing every day these huge challenges the species and the planet are facing. And like, it's social entrepreneurship and impact investing, I think, that are like, okay, well, at least we can do this, right? And then when we add that layer of systems thinking, if we do this in a coordinated way, we can have an outsized impact.
Again, we're very pleased to have Dr. Christine Mahoney with us from the University of Virginia's Batten School of Leadership and Policy. And unfortunately, I think our time is up for this episode, but we do want to encourage listeners to visit Dr. Mahoney's website at the University of Virginia if you want interested in learning more about social entrepreneurship and impact investment, as well as her work with Refugee Investment Network across the globe. We're very pleased again, and thank you so much, Dr. Mahoney, for joining us on this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation, and we hope that you'll join us for another episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, and thank you, Christine and Mary.
Thanks, Eric.
For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a soil and water conservation district office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.